This video is going to discuss why I'm quite positive that the Most High is going to send forth a single calamity tomorrow, or even possibly tonight, to confirm that He has sent me to you, and to testify that the great and the fearful day of His wrath is near at hand. And in light of many of His warnings that He has sent me with, being for the Yellowstone caldera blowing forth at this time, this could very well be this single destructive event. On what would have been the 8th day Sabbath that follows the 7 days of His Feast of Ingathering, if Yahweh had not extended this feast to 14 days this year, He caused me to speak that the 7th seal of the revelations of His only begotten Son has been opened. I said that the seal was opened with His revelation of the final 7 days of the 21 silver trumpet assembly calls that He has orchestrated at His house at this time. I also said that there were dual scenarios for when the final 84 hours of silence from His dual heavens might have begun. And I also said that there was a third possibility that He might hold this back until after the 84th trumpet blast that was on the 14th day of this dual 7-day feast. What He has revealed to me since then is beyond amazing. At that time He caused me to speak that the 7 days of the 7 vials of the 7th trumpet would follow the 14 days of this feast. 2 days into these 7 days He sent the Revelation 12 sign in His dual heavens. 3 days prior to this event, my daughter had took an abrupt turn away from His truth, and she decided to leave the Most High's camp and to go back into the world. Her motive that she expressed to me and to her mother for wanting to do this was that she wanted to do so in order to get a job so that she could sustain Yahweh's anointed, because He has caused us to be in dire need of money at this time. I asked her to at least wait until after the Sabbath, that was the next day, and then the Most High caused another delay that kept her from going after the Sabbath ended. However, she still removed herself to outside of His camp, and she removed her head covering, and her mind was made up, and she refused to even listen to my plea for her to stay. But then on the 3rd day, the day that the Virgin was in the sky, clothed with the sun and with the moon under her feet, I went to where she was pitched, and her head was covered, and she was ashamed, and for the first time in this, she was truly in love with her Maker. The timing of this complete and instant turnaround with the Virgin that was in the sky was incredible. It turns out that she is the Virgin that the Most High was going to send forth to bring forth a third man-child at this time, whose name is Mahare Shalawl Koosh Baz. Yahweh speaks of this third man-child in His Isaiah chapter 7 and chapter 8 prophecy. In chapter 8 He tells us the following: "And Yahweh said to me, Take you a great mirror, and write upon it with a mortal's pen concerning Mahare Shalawl Koosh Baz. And the faithful witnesses Uriah the priest and Zechariah the son of Jeberechiah testified to it, and I approached near to the prophetess, and she conceived, and she bare a son. And Yahweh said to me, Cry out his name, Mahare Shalawl Koosh Baz, because before the child will know to cry out, his father and his mother will be lifted up before the king of Assyria's faces, with the riches of Damascus, and with the Shalal of Samaria. And Yahweh continued to speak to me, adding, Because seeing that this people despises the waters of departure that journey softly, and take joy in Rezin and in Remaliah's son. Therefore, behold, Adonai will rise up the waters of a mighty and abundant river upon them, and the king of Assyria and all of his glory and all of his channels will rise up upon them and go upon all of their banks to change Judah, and they will overflow and pass over and touch unto the neck. And it will be that the expansion of his wings will fill the breadth of your land, O Immanuel." Immanuel means Elohim is with us. His use of Immanuel in this verse tells us plainly that chapter 8 is a continuation of his chapter 7 prophecy. In chapter 7, he tells us that he was going to send forth a sign of a virgin that was going to bring forth a man-child at this time, and that this man-child would be called Immanuel, or Elohim is with us. And he also tells us that this was going to happen in conjunction with 65 years. These 65 years are a prophecy that is for 65 days. I will expand how we can know this. Expand on how we can know this. If you think that this end-time prophecy is for his only begotten Son, you are delusional. How did Yeshua's virgin birth fit into this prophecy? Granted, it parallels Yeshua coming forth from a virgin. However, it has nothing else other than this to do with it. When my daughter Kendra turned back to Kikwe that day, he began to give her the ability to see things that he had recorded in the testimony of his word that he had not shown to me. Therefore, she is this prophetess. The day after my daughter turned back to him was the first day of the 8th month on our Maker's Restored calendar. Prior to this day, he had showed me that this day was the first day of the final tier of the 3 days of his Hosea chapter 6 prophecy. This prophecy tells us that he was going to keep me alive for dual more days, and then on the 3rd day he was going to rise me up. This happened. He did so in a very, very big way. He rose my dual feet upon the cradle stone of his house on this 3rd day. I'm not going to go into the details of him doing so in this video. I will simply tell you that he showed me that this is when he anointed me to be king over Israel. This was on 9/24 on his servant Satan's calendar. On this day he also showed my daughter, his prophetess, Psalms 45. In this Psalms he tells us the following. The inside of the king's daughter is all glorious, and her clothing is set in gold. She will be brought unto the king, referring to the king of this psalm, in embroiderings, and her companions, the virgins that will follow her, will come unto you. They will be brought unto you, and they will go into the king's palace with glee and with joy. When she told me to read this psalm, both of us thought, absolutely no way. She even thought to not tell me about it. However, then on the 3rd day from Kikwe giving this revelation to her, he clearly showed both of us that this is true, and that it is true for the here and the now. In the previous verses, in verse 10, he tells us that this daughter of the king is not actually my daughter. He does so by telling her to forget her own people and her father's house. This prophetess is not actually my daughter. She is my stepdaughter. Since this revelation, her mother, who has also stood beside me for these 11 years, also had to address this, and she has embraced it, because this is what Kikwe's word says. There is also other proof of this that he gave to us in the testimony of his word to testify to this. A big part of this proof is found in the Song of Solomon that is written upon her. On the 3rd day, when he caused both of us to believe this, he also caused her to begin her monthly uncleanliness, so this event was postponed. Since she began this uncleanliness in the middle of the day, day number 1 of 7 was the next day, which was the 4th day of this 8th month. Therefore, day number 7 is today, and tomorrow, on the 8th day of the 8th month, she will be clean, and she will come unto the king, clothed in embroiderings, in order to conceive Mahare Shalawl Koosh Baz. The 2nd day of Kendra's monthly uncleanliness was the day that the Most High caused me to speak would be the 7th day of the 7 days of the 7 vials of the 7th trumpet. This was the 21st day of the 14 eyes being lit to illuminate his house each night. It was on this day that Kikwe gave Kendra the Mahare Shalawl Koosh Baz revelation. On this day there were 65 days to the 10th day of the 10th month. This is not only the day that he caused his servant Nebuchadnezzar to pitch against Jerusalem, it is also the day that he gave to us for his 5-point Ezekiel chapter 24 sign, that is his very, very simple promise to us that he has sent me to you. He gave us this sign in association with my wife dying, which is ultimately symbolic of the bride of the make-believe image of his only begotten son dying. However, he gave us this revelation 65 days prior to her death so that she could seize him and live. Up until this time, she was merely obeying his voice because of me, and she was not doing so because she loved him with her entire life and with all vehemence and with all of her mind. She had omitted 2 of the 3 weightier matters of his Torah. She had omitted his righteous judgment that is upon all that do not love him for who he is, and she did not have brokenness in her for her inward sins of not fully loving to obey his voice. her having her husband, whom she loves very, very much, stripped away from her and given to her virgin daughter, utterly shattered her heart. Telling her was the hardest thing that I have ever had to do. However, she chose to look at the evidence, and she chose to consider her folly. The third of these three weightier matters of his Torah is true belief, and this she did have, and still has. She believes his word that testifies that he has sent me, and because of her belief, she has acknowledged her folly, and she has accepted his righteous judgment, and she has seized what he is doing at this time through her daughter and through his second anointed son. I will read the 8 verses of his Immanuel prophecy that I read to you a bit ago, expanding on it and telling you the meaning of some of the names that are in this prophecy. And Kitwe said to me, "Take you a great mirror and write upon it with a mortal's pen concerning Mahare Shalawl Koosh Baz." This great mirror is referring to him causing me to echo his warnings to you from his mountains. An echo repeats itself. In Ezekiel chapter 7, verse 7, he tells us that there was going to come a day when he is going to cease from echoing from his mountains. He did cease from doing so. He did so on the first day of this 8th month. He caused the Repairing the Breach website to go down because his house did not have the funds to pay for it this month because you continue stealing from him. Like I said earlier, this day was on 9/24 on his servant Satan's calendar. For those of you that do not know the significance of his dual prophecies that are for the 24th day of the 9th month on his calendar, he tells us that he is going to cause the dual heavens and the earth and such to shake in association with this date and in association with his end-time servant Zerubbabel and the signature ring that he has put upon my hand. He gave us this Ezekiel chapter 7 prophecy in association with the 5th day of the 4th month, and he also gave it to us in association with his 7 days in Tel Aviv prophecy. 84 hours is 3½ days, therefore dual 84-hour periods is 7 days. All of his dual references that he has woven into the here and the now indeed puts his prophetess Kendra's 7th day today and her 8th day clean status tomorrow in the spotlight. There is much more that testifies to this as well, such as 4 and now 5 different 7-day periods, some of which overlap, that are in the 26 days that encompass the first day of the feast and Kendra's 7th day. Kendra's 7th day today is also the 7th day of him stopping repeating himself to you from his mountains through the website. It is for these dual reasons that I am quite confident that he is going to send forth the single calamity of his Ezekiel chapter 7 prophecy after today's 7th day, or when Baz is conceived. The 5th day of the 8th month, when he showed Kendra the Mahare Shalawl Koosh Baz prophecy, is 4 months after the 5th day of the 4th month. He raised his servant David up to be king after the unspecified number of days and 4 months that he was fled into the land of the uncircumcised Philistines. Maher means hastily or at once. Shalal means the spoil. Koosh means to hurry or to be eager. Baz means the plunder. Therefore this man-child's name means you are going to be spoiled and plundered suddenly and in a hurry once this child is conceived. He is indeed going to spoil that which he has given to you to possess in an instant when he lets this loose. Verse 2, and the faithful witnesses Uriah the priest and Zechariah the son of Jeberechiah testified to it. Uriah means the flame of Kitwe. This refers to the supernatural passion that he suddenly gave to us to cause us to know that this is true. We know that we are going to be bringing forth this child unto him. Zechariah means Kitwe has marked, or the mark of Kitwe. He marked his servant at this time on the same day that he marked his servant Noah, which was on the 17th day of the 7th month. He did so with his release of the 7th seal that he has caused to flow into this dual 84-hour period of time, revelation, and the 4, now 5 7-day periods of time that encompass his 7th month feast and today's 7th day. Jeberechiah means the blessed of Kitwe. His Daniel chapter 12 verse 12 prophecy tells us, blessed is he that waits and touches the 1335th day. he caused both his prophetess Kendra and his second anointed son to accept his Psalms 45 prophecy on the 1335th day from a particular anniversary of the day that he caused his servant Noah to let loose the second dove that brought back the olive branch, symbolic of his second anointed son. How he caused us both to accept this revelation was and is indeed incredibly supernatural. Therefore the two of us were indeed blessed on this 1335th day. And I approached near to the prophetess, and she conceived, and she bare a son, and Yahweh said to me, cry aloud his name, Mahare Shalawl Koosh Baz, because before the child will know to cry aloud, his father and his mother will be lifted up before the king of Assyria's faces with the wealth of Damascus and with the Shalawl of Samaria. It sounds an awful lot like this is going to come to pass before this third man-child is born, since a baby knows to cry aloud to his parents when he or she is born. Plus, chapter 7 tells us that this is going to come to pass in association with 65 years or 65 days, since the Most High has sent me to you in the manner of a day for a year. Perhaps it is just a coincidence that 65 days from his revelation of this Immanuel, aka Mahare Shalawl Koosh Baz prophecy, is the 10th day of the 10th month. In verse 5, Yahweh continued to speak to me, adding, because seeing that this people despise the waters of departure that journey softly, and take joy in Rezin and in Remaliah's son. Perhaps it is just a coincidence that his word calls the lower pool that is dug below his house the pool of departure. Rezin comes from a word that means delightful acceptance. Therefore, this is a prophetic reference to you accepting your own desires instead of seeking the delightful acceptance of Yahweh. You delight in your own desires instead of in his. Remaliah's son is referring to a king that was named Pekah. Pekah was a king that reigned for 20 years over Israel, and he did that which is evil with Yahweh's dual eyes, and he did not depart from the sins of Jeroboam. Yahweh's prophetess is 20 years old. Pekah comes from a word that means to open the eyes. The Most High closed Kendra's dual eyes that were only partly open to begin with, because she had not fully seized him, but then he opened them wide, and he did so all at once, and suddenly. It was quite amazing to see this happen. Jeroboam profaned the Most High's 7th month feast by moving it to the 8th month. This is why he ties this in with Pekah not doing away with the sins of Jeroboam. Is it a coincidence that his 7th month feast is followed by what his word calls the 8th day Sabbath, and Kendra's 8th day, that is tomorrow, is 3 days' journey from the 8th day Sabbath of the 8th month? Why do you think he marked the 8th day the way that he did, with it being the only one of its kind that he gave to us in the testimony of his word, and with this day following the 7 days of his Feast of Ingathering? Isaiah chapter 7 tells us that the head of Ephraim is Samaria, and that Remaliah's son Pekah is the head of Samaria. Therefore, this prophecy tells us that Remaliah's son Pekah is referring to Ephraim at this time. Verse 7, therefore, behold, Adonai will rise up the waters of a mighty and abundant river upon them, and the king of Assyria and all of his glory, and all of its channels will rise up upon them and go upon all of their banks, to change Judah, to turn you back, and they will overflow and pass over and touch unto the neck, and it will be that the expansion of his wings will fill the breadth of your land, O Immanuel. Elohim's word tells us that he is with those who are doing work on his house at this time. Is the expansion of his wings referring to Baz's wings, if this third man-child is not even born yet in the 65 days of this prophecy during which he is conceived? Or is this referring to the wings of the dual wings of an eagle that are bringing forth his conception? One thing that I do know is that Elohim is going to be with this child, because his word says so, and because Baz is going to be taught to live by every word that Yahweh my Elohim has sent forth from his mouth from the time that he knows to cry aloud to us. And I also know that a virgin is going to conceive him in the days that are ahead, that begin tomorrow, in order to be the sign to you that the Most High told us that he was going to send forth at this time. If you want to scoff and mock at this sign that he is sending forth with this video going forth, this is certainly your choice to do so. His prophetess's mother chose to look at the evidence instead. I have only spoken about a very little bit of this evidence in this video, so perhaps I will do a follow-up video that discusses more of it in the future. However, if the Most High does send forth a single calamity tomorrow on Kendra's 8th day, like Yellowstone blowing, perhaps even at 7:34 a.m., I suppose that it will not be necessary for me to do so.